Hi, friends. I'm Scott Giles, a board-certified diplomate of the National Guild of Hypnotists, a certified hypno coach, and today I want to talk about a wonderful self-help technique that I learned many decades ago. I learned it from a woman named Ruth Carter Stapleton. She was the sister of President Jimmy Carter. She was an evangelist and a faith healer. Now, bear in mind, I am a board-certified chaplain, a ordained Unitarian Universalist clergyman and final fellowship, so religious stuff like this interests me. Stapleton struggled all her life with chronic depression. In fact, she also had trauma. She was almost killed in a car accident shortly after her children were born. She maintained a ministry she called the Ministry of Healing Memories. And it's a fascinating spiritual technique, but I developed a hypnotic version of it, which I want to share with you. Ruth Carter Stapleton had quite a career. In fact, you may know her name from kind of a scandal that occurred. In 1977, she befriended Larry Flynt, the publisher of the porn magazine Hustler, and converted him briefly to Christianity, but it didn't take, I'm afraid to say. What Ruth Carter Stapleton did is she would go around the country, usually talking in churches of a more evangelical or fundamentalist bent, and teaching a technique for healing memories. What she wanted you to do was to just sit quietly, and then in your mind's eye, recall some painful memory that you have. Then, imagine that Jesus of Nazareth appears magically in that memory and does something to either forgive what happened or forgive you or to provide comfort or a different perspective. You imagine the painful memory as if it had happened some other way. Now, when you do this, it does work. You don't actually overwrite the old memory. You're just simply creating a more positive fantasy that fits into the previous memory sequences. You will always know what really happened and that Jesus didn't show up and save you, but it pulls some of the emotional charge out of it. And Stapleton published this technique in her books, The Gift of Inner Healing, The Experience of Inner Healing, and her last book, In His Footsteps, The Healing Ministry of Jesus Then and Now. Now, this was purely a spiritual technique and obviously a very Christian one. But Stapleton began to do world travel and teach her techniques in different countries, originally just in Christian areas, but eventually she expanded and she ended up teaching her techniques in Asia and elsewhere. Now, having Jesus heal you is not going to please a room full of Buddhists, for example. So she modified her technique and found it was equally effective. You could have Buddha show up, or the Prophet Muhammad, or the Dalai Lama, or simply someone significant of authority from history, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, take your pick. And this imaginative fantasy, which is being created by this technique, will make the painful memory less painful. Now, as soon as she gave up on Jesus and started recommending other figures to use, the evangelical world came down on her like a ton of bricks, as you can probably imagine. But because she was implying that these other people, Buddhists and so on, were the equivalent of Jesus, which did not sit well with evangelical Christians. Because of that backlash, she backed off from that and just continued to do the Christian imagery. She died of pancreatic cancer in 1983. She refused conventional medicine, and a lot of people were saying that when she died, this was proof her techniques were not miracles. But in fact, in 1983, we didn't really have very much for pancreatic cancer, especially an advanced case like she had. And so while we can treat it now, we couldn't treat it then. And choosing to forego conventional medicine, which would likely have been painful and ineffective, was not actually a bad decision. Now, when I studied this technique from her, when I learned it, I realized that it could be done hypnotically. And we didn't have to use Jesus. We could use almost any figure of authority, just as she found. So I developed a series of hypnotic inductions. Typical pattern. where a client is encouraged to bring to mind, in a hypnotized state, the painful memory, and then we intervene with something that is compatible for the client. And that could be a secular figure, a religious figure, a guardian angel, whatever you want. This technique proved so effective that I taught it to my congregation when I was serving as the parish minister to the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Oak Park, Illinois. I got a reputation for it. A number of the psychiatrists in the community found that this was so effective for the patients that they were working with as psychiatrists that they would often ask them to attend the workshops and stuff that I did. In fact, I would ultimately do a Friday evening healing service every week where this technique was used for anyone in the community who wanted to come. It got well enough known that when I made my jump from parish ministry into community ministry, which is what my hypnosis ministry is technically called, I was invited by the Chicago Medical Society to write an article for their publication, Chicago Medicine. I've got a copy of it here. Now, I realize when I hold it up, the text is going to be reversed because of the way the cameras work, but you can kind of get the idea. So this was called Healing the Heartbreak, and it became the cover article for this edition of Chicago Medicine, and which put my name in front of the psychiatric community of Chicago and the medical community of Chicago. Got a very positive reaction, and a number of other people have used the technique. It's very easy to explain and to use. So when I do it in hypnosis. The figure can be any figure that you want to have the client imagine come into the scene and do the healing of the memory. And then you anchor it in some way. And I found it was effective when you heal a memory to ask the client to find some object, an amulet or a talisman, if you will, that they can put in their environment to serve as a reminder of the healed memory. I come from a family that's something of a train wreck, and I had a pretty rocky childhood. One of the best experiences I had, though, is I was a member of a motorcycle club, and it was a very good experience for me. So to this day, I still wear biker jewelry. This is my anchor. This reminds me of those memories from my childhood that I healed using this technique. So I recommend it to you. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back next week at 2:30 Central Time with another video. And of course, I do put these up on my YouTube channel, which you can access through my website, www.csgiles.org. And always, if you want to know how hypnosis can help you achieve your goals, deal with a scary diagnosis, or promote your own health and wellness, please feel free to reach out to me. It's what I'm here for. And next week I'll be back, and my topic then is going to be more for the hypnosis community. Legal mistakes I've seen hypnotic colleagues make. I am the chairman of the ethics committee of the National Guild of Hypnotists, and I think you might find that helpful. Thank you much. Have a good one.